Welcome to Artist Talk on Art. I'm Doug Shear, Chairman Emeritus. Tonight's panel, Back to the Garden, marks the start of our 2022 program schedule and the start of our 48th year. ATOA is the longest running forum in the art world, with 8,500 artists presented and over 1,000 panels under our belt. Tonight's panel was organized by Lois Bender, who also will moderate and features two other artists, Shelly and Pamela Casper. Our in-person physical panels have been in a hiatus mode since the advent of COVID in 2020 and are anticipated to resume at some point, possibly this spring, in Greenwich Village. Watch the atoanyc.org website for updates. Your questions and comments are welcome toward the end of the panel by using the chat system within the Zoom. So you won't be able to verbally address questions, but Lois will look at your chat comments or questions and address them to her two panelists or answer them herself. The panel itself is copyrighted by Artist Talk on Art and all rights are reserved. It's being recorded and that recording will soon be posted to our YouTube channel. Artist Talk on Art charges no admission, but your donations are always welcome. See our website for details. And now I'd like to introduce Lois Bender. Her garden credentials begin with being the daughter of Flora Bloom. How is that for a name? And the granddaughter of Hortense Bloom, alternating family names for 5 generations. She graduated from Hunter College with a BA in studio art and received an MFA in painting from Boston University, where she studied with Philip Guston. I'm jealous. She attended Skowhegan in Maine as well. An influential experience as a young artist in New York was working at the Knoedler Art Gallery and seeing many of the more influential art world personages from the inside, with luminaries like Salvador Dali and John Richardson, the distinguished art historian. She pursued a career in graphic design and advertising in New York with firms like Margiotis, Fertitta, and Weiss, working on brands like Godiva chocolate as an introduction to the gift industry. After a serious illness, she followed her own bliss, creating her successful brand, Tea Quotes and Garden Spirits, of tea and botanical garden designs for gift products like journals, stationery, textiles, all with a healing message. She also worked as a product designer for the New York Botanical Garden, translating their illustrious library of botanical images into products. After 9/11, she turned her sights to teaching art, sharing the cultural heritage of art with students at Essex County College, a community college in Newark, New Jersey. She continues to teach watercolor in various venues and many beautiful gardens in the Hamptons. Last summer, she was a featured artist at Landscape Details at East Hampton's Guild Hall, signature garden event and tour, The Garden as Art. She's received residencies at Women's Studio Workshop in Rosendale, New York, in printmaking, and at CAMAC, Marne-sur-Seine, France, working on her project, Painting Paris's Gardens. Presently, she leads the New York Artist Circle's curatorial committee and will curate a group show this spring entitled, I Dreamed a Garden. She currently works in watercolor and printmaking mediums and exhibits her work in various galleries in New York and the Hamptons. Lois.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Doug, for that warm welcome and invitation to present a panel tonight. I brought this panel together tonight to talk about gardens as inspiration for our artist practices, but also the idea of gardens as symbols of human cultivation and enlightenment, essential for survival, culture, and art. When we garden, we cultivate not only the soil, but also our soul. And that garden soul is what brings me to thinking about Joni Mitchell, the folk goddess of many youthful memories and inspiration for tonight's Back to the Garden panel and my own work. As an iconic songwriter and legendary troubadour of the 1960s flower child generation, her poetic and visionary song, Woodstock, came back to me in her lyrics. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. This theme of Back to the Garden resonates again deeply in her then plea to return to the innocence of the garden amidst the turmoil of the 1960s. It also echoes a total relevance to today's turmoil in climate change, the pandemic, and the real threat of political fascism to our human rights and culture. Hearing her call, I was prompted to share my habitual return to gardens for inspiration, inviting my friends Pamela, Casper, and Shelly Haven to share their own artistic journeys as well. As one of the millions of rightful heirs to Back to the Garden, as a flower child daughter of the 1960s, I and we are blessed with the playlist of the three muses, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, and Joni Mitchell, and the Beatles, Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary, Simon and Garfunkel, and 1969's Woodstock. Youth spoke with their power of music, soul, poetry, and protest. Joni Mitchell found an idealistic utopian Garden of Eden in this hippie commune, and she recognized a human yearning to return back to the idyllic garden as a paradise and a respite from the struggles of wandering in the wilderness of human cruelty, war, and natural disasters. Hearing this imperative to return to them, artists envision creating gardens on paper, etc., frequently visiting them to find a renewal of ideas. We hope you will see why we are drawn to admire the infinite variety of gardens to behold and why they inspire us. We'd like to play Joni Mitchell singing Woodstock a little later, but now we have a 6-minute slideshow about the history of gardens in many different cultures with a few garden-themed artworks in the canon of art history. And it has an instrumental of Woodstock as a backdrop to enjoy the show. Each slide shows only for 10 seconds, but the show will give you a little garden background. So at this point, I'm going to share the screen and play our slideshow. Okay. You can't talk. Anything wrong? That's it. Oh, I hope you enjoyed that as quick as it was. Let me play this now. Well, that was a very brief history, as you could see. And I hope you can see that the gardens are seen as paradises, escapes, havens, and idyllic sanctuaries for food, beauty, serenity, and enlightenment in private or communal plots, often based on the Garden of Eden creation story in Genesis, seen as universal habitat of peaceful bliss. For myself, I've been very drawn to the element of water in gardens and found that the Persian Paradise Garden fused the elements of plant and water into their cross-plan design with so much success, influencing gardens from antiquity to today. We humans create gardens with intention, cultivating them for many purposes. For artists, the garden is an entry point into the imagination, though we are drawn to them for different reasons. Pamela, Shelly, and I will show you why we love gardens. I actually don't have a garden of my own, so my gardens I create are on paper, and I am an enthusiastic visitor of other people's gardens, both public and private, and I will show you some of the gardens I love and visit and with my artistic journey. I'm going to talk over this for a paragraph, and then I will go into my show. Beyond Joni Mitchell's lyrics of Back to the Garden, I've always been inspired by literature and poetry about the gardens. It influenced my art throughout my career. I look for the poetic image in the flower and the pond. One of my favorite 20th century French philosophers, Gaston Bachelard, not very well known in the US, believes the poetic image is the key to experiencing the world and nature more deeply. He has written extensively about the state of reverie in the written poetic word and in the imagery of the four elements of water, earth, air, and fire. I look at gardens as places inspiring reveries. Here's a few lines from a poem by the English romantic poet Wordsworth, saying farewell to a summer garden, planning a return. O happy garden, whose seclusion deep hath been so friendly to industrious hours, and to soft slumbers that did gently steep our spirits, carrying with them dreams of flowers. These poetic images ring out dreams of flowers, soft slumbers, steeping spirits resembling tea, a seclusion, revealing the reverie of deeply felt feelings for these gardens. For me, a garden is a place of metamorphosis and transformation. Flora, which is my mother's name, Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers, is said to be responsible for the metamorphosis of Adonis, Attis, Crocus, Hyacinthus, and Narcissus into flowers. How powerful. But there is a transformation experienced by being in gardens. I may not turn into a flower, but I connect with the surrounding world. Here are my field notes to some art that you'll see shortly, as I interpret the garden in many different styles, techniques, and processes. So I will go through some gardens I've been painting in and talk about the Wave Hill Pond that I frequent a lot. And so I'll begin here with painting a shaded summer garden. I was in East Hampton this summer and painting at the garden for landscape details. And what struck me about this garden as we sit and try to decide what to paint was the really saturated, luscious color of the allium globes in the shade. And that prompted me to sit and enjoy that particular image. And I painted about 7 or 8 paintings there, but it was like challenging to find and sit around a garden and decide what to paint. And I felt like I was experiencing a reverie in the garden. Another garden that I love is the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And these are the Conservancy glass houses. And you have a tropical scene here. And I'm drawing somebody sitting there who's also a sketch artist. And the New York City Urban Sketches frequently goes all over the city, and they provide a wonderful atmosphere to paint with others and sketch with others. Tropical plants are very luscious, and this is, it's fun to have the variety of different types of gardens. On the upper right, I have lavender garden that's at the Wave Hill Gardens. So beside the pond, I do like other aspects of their gardens, of course. This is a wisteria pergola, and I'm watching the shadows fall upon the ground. This is a freer style of watercolor, more intuitive, and my mediums are watercolor, printmaking, and I'll describe them in a moment with the next slide. This is the imagined gardens. Besides observed gardens, it's wonderful to take off and interpret gardens to your inner vision, to your inner eye. In the first slide, I'm using watercolor. I'm sorry, in the first panel, it's a watercolor. And I often work from floral arrangements. And there's a few stencils in that as well. In the next panel, I'm working with a photogram, and photography is another big area of interest for me. I love the random shapes that you get and the surprise of working with photograms. In the third panel, I'm working with printmaking and stencils. I'm working on Japanese paper and creating shinkolei on heavier paper of watercolor. I'm also using line work with metallic paint. And I also work with stencils and a more free style in the very last panel. That is composed of the stencils I have from 25 years ago. These ideas that I listed next to Flora at the bottom, the pedimenti, shadows, reflections, and graffiti, I think about the idea of layering and the pedimenti surprise layering qualities of mixing different aspects together. And shadows and light, of course, is important to the work that you do with silhouetting. Reflections are beautiful on the surface of the water. That's why I really love Palance, because you get the doubleness of the actual plant image above and then the reflected image in the water. And graffiti is mark making. So besides observing and painting plein air and gardens, I love to create work that's more from the imagination. Speaking of shadows, I work here with these stencils and create with alcohol dye. I'm spraying it from bottles. I'm creating different imagery of layering, and I'm also doing printmaking. I did these just before the pandemic in this series, and I worked at a printmaking studio with Karen Bruckner. On the left side here, I have the stencils working, and I did the one on the left about 25 years ago, and I'm still working with stencils today. I like the variety, and in different times of your work life, you see different things with working with the same elements. In fact, the element of the daisy, the aster, I think the aster at the top is repeated in one of the panels on the right. A big theme that I love is water gardens, and I really look at ponds like Wave Hills ponds. I find, if I can read over here, the pond is an eye, a mirror connecting the earth to the sky, and the surface of bodies of water do reflect above, and that's what you get to have a feeling of the unity of the cosmos of the earth by unifying the ideas above and below the water. These are two separate artworks. There's a diptych on the left and a diptych on the right. These are trace monoprints on the left, where you get the line work. On the right, it's a painting with brush and ink. I love the graffiti qualities that you work when you really work with the textures you're seeing in front of you. And I really like the wavy lines created by the reflections from grasses. This is a watercolor painting the pond at Wave Hill. And because this year they had very few plants in the water, you could get a larger surface that's free of plants. So that there's a little photograph on the bottom left, and you can see that you get the whole sense of the clouds, the cloudscape that's reflected in the water. In other years, they have a lot of plants and you won't get that kind of panoramic feeling of the sky and the water. I'm using a lot of white space, and I like to be pretty intuitive when I do watercolors and have a fresh sense of the color. This is Wave Hill. For those of you who are not familiar, beautiful garden overlooking the Hudson. I painted the glass house here, but this is the sense of the garden besides just the pond. Sometimes when we like one garden more than any other, we neglect the rest of the garden. So, but there's beauty throughout the garden. This is a painting in daytime of the garden, of the pond, and I'm working with the textures of the grasses and lots of greens. It's a real skill to work with green and give variety, I guess, because people have trouble creating greens. But I do love the flow. But what really inspires me is well, I'll have a close-up first. This is a close-up of the pond, and I like using the white for the reflections and the glistening quality of light. The pond in the evening was really spectacular. Wave Hill had evening hours on Wednesday till 8 p.m. I don't believe it was this year or the previous year due to COVID. But what really was inspiring was the golden light at the end of the day and the dusk or twilight, this kind of semi-light where you get these glistening qualities of metallic lights, glowing beads of lights on the water, but you get the soft light of the evening and you get these gorgeous shadows. You get the black shadows from the trees. There's trees back here where the sun is coming through, but they create these really velvety shadows in the water. So I responded to that completely. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to run through 12 slides. I am not going to talk over them because I want you to get the feel of the slides and take in their different printmaking processes. I use photography and I use painting. So the three processes basically are flowing in and out of this series. And I can talk about the processes at another time, but I'd like to start talking again. And when we get to some pink slides, which should be just a short while, I'll spend 10 seconds, 15 seconds on each, and hope you enjoy this flow and the rhythm of seeing just art without speaking. Well, we're back. We're back to the pink slides. I hope that you enjoyed that medley or survey of a lot of different images on the pond with all the different processes. When those were done over a period of about 10 years, but these few artworks have been done more recently. I had found pink paper and did printmaking on a monoprint on the pink paper on the left of the motif that I've been very attracted to. And I love the pink. So when I had, the COVID kept us all pretty much homebound. And I started to pick up materials I hadn't picked up in a long time. I found pastels and I wanted to get the pink quality of sky and the sunlight on the water. So I started using the pastels and was attracted to the hatching that Degas uses with his pastels. So I started to experiment with that. On the very right is another evening dusk picture of the pond. This is more of the dusk using the hatching technique in a more free, large scale way of the strokes. And I'm not quite ready to leave the pond yet, but I have explored it pretty extensively. I also liked putting drips onto that surface. So I'm looking for more untraditional ways to work. Even though I'm going back to traditional methods, it takes time to explore. And then finally, for the pastels, on the left is a student piece that I had done many years ago. Don't even know how many years ago, but I found it intriguing to see a pastel from a very long time ago. And I wanted to just experiment and look into the feeling of doing one that's contemporary for me today. So the right one is done in the last 2 years. And it was fun to compare, seeing old work and how it influences or inspires you to do new work. And recently, I was asked to join a show about Earth on the Edge, the ecology crises we have today. And Marsha Annenberg asked me to be part of her show. That was at the Series Gallery last month. And I started to do the stencils for corals. And I researched them and found the variety of corals that are at risk. And I really enjoyed working on this new theme. I also had lots of drips. So I feel that it's good to be free and a little less traditional. And that's where I'm going to be going in my direction. There's another slide here for the stencils with alcohol dyes. On the very right is the composite of 12 pieces that was shown in the show. And if you look above, you're going to see the white corals. And to tell you the truth, it may look beautiful, but it's dead. And this was something I was uneducated about, how severe the die-off is of corals. So white corals are very bad. And I guess we all should mobilize to save the rare earth, or go back to the sea garden, as Joni Mitchell would say. And to close the conversation about my work, I just want to bring up a few other pieces of my interests in my art practice. And they're painting gardens, visiting gardens. And as you can see, the top left one is the Jardin du Luxembourg in Paris. They have these gorgeous urns in a measured way throughout the garden. It's a formal classical design, French Renaissance garden. And I love the expanse of the sky. On the upper right is the gardens in the Hamptons that I like to paint. And in the center, on the bottom, both sides, I'm doing a painting of Bryant Park. You have the cafe on umbrellas on the left and the fountain on the right. And it's kind of a dance and a performance to spend an hour and paint. These are paintings of Paris. The upper one is a panorama of the Jardin du Luxembourg. And, you know, again, I'm an urn person. The bottom one is the Tuileries, and I'm sitting in the edge of the Tuileries at the flower beds and looking at the Louvre. And of course, with the low building code in Paris, it's 24/7 clouds. You get the amazing cloudscapes. So it's half a painting of clouds and half a painting of the earth. These are more urns, and whether it's more free or more controlled, you know, I can paint them forever. The bottom right is the flower beds at the Tuileries. And this is a local garden in Long Island at Planting Fields Arboretum. This villa is a mansion called Coe Hall. Of course, all these estates were founded by wealthy people a century ago or whenever, and they develop them. They have the money to build the homes, the gardens, import so much from Europe. I went here with Pamela. We painted here a year or two ago, and having studied the gardens a little bit, this back garden is an Italianate garden, and the feeling there, they had lots of flower beds, but it's nice to be in these beautiful gardens. And these are the Hampton Gardens, and just an overview of all the sites to be painting there. It's really nice. I mean, any village gardens throughout the country, all villages have beautiful gardens. I teach out there as well, and I've been there about 20 years. I'm going to now just tell you that I've been fortunate enough to have a career with commercial art and take these ideas and interpret them into the marketplace. So just to close, I'll have a few of these images. And I have done stationery based on these garden spirit ideas. At the bottom right are vellum cards. They're see-through writing papers, and they're clear, and they're really have been selling for 20 years. And this is a silk scarf that I painted. I was into silk painting for a few years, and they have the motifs of the garden spirits imagery that I have been using and love. And the right are different pieces from printmaking and painting. This was the booth that I had shown at the with my products for a few years. I developed this line after I had leukemia, and it was just great to have an independent entrepreneurial business and purpose. It was just thrilling to sell to nationally and internationally. It was about 5 years long. On the left was panels made of acrylic. I branded it as Resonates, but it was hard to sell because of competition. Lumicore was a big name then, and you have, of course, same story. Flowers, I painted a lot of flowers, and this represents a big body of work I was painting in the 2000s. I was influenced by a great flower shop in Sag Harbor, and I could just live in a flower shop. So I do want to thank you for coming to this segment of the slideshow. And I want to thank Doug and ATOA, and we'll leave you with a quote from Voltaire. So it's obvious, I know many of you have heard of the quote, "We must cultivate our own garden." And I've come to learn that it's not just individual gardens, it's the communal garden, the responsibility to each other to garden and save the planet and save the world. So with that, I can say thank you and stop share and introduce Pamela. Let me escape that. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, let me see here. Well, thank you. Okay. Well, it wasn't so long. Okay. We're watching the clock, right? If we really conclude pretty well, we can hear Joni Mitchell sing. At any rate. So I'd like to introduce Pamela right now. And Pamela's Casper's artwork is informed by the natural world and her concerns for our shifting ecological climate. Her recent paintings explore nature's ecosystems underground in invented landscapes. However, painting on location and observing nature directly is at the core of her artistic practice. Pamela is a native New Yorker and currently lives and works in Brooklyn. She studied painting with Harriet Shore at Swarthmore College, followed by living and painting in Paris for 2 years. Pamela's work has been exhibited in group exhibitions at notable institutions such as the American Watercolor Society in New York, Exit Art in New York, Equity Gallery in New York, Governor's Island, as well as the Mindener Museum in Minden, Germany. Her recent work was included in the 2020 Echo Art Space catalog, curated by Eleanor Hartney. And in 2021, her work was selected by curator Liliane Faggi for the Echo Art Space exhibition and book, The Embedded Forest. Pamela Casper received an award for excellence from the Gramercy Arts Club Pastel Society and was a finalist for the New York Foundation of the Arts Basil Alcassi Painting Award. Pamela completed a residency at eMerge at Earth Dance for Living in Plainfield, Massachusetts, and the Vermont Studio Center in Johnson, Vermont. She's also had solo exhibitions at Gallery Shirley in Geneva, Switzerland, the Wood Gallery in Paulette, Vermont, and recently at the Wisner House Gallery in Reeves Reed Arboretum in Summit, New Jersey. In November 2021, Pamela exhibited in a group show, Causality, curated by Kim Power at the Atlantic Gallery in Chelsea, New York. So I want to welcome Pamela. Thank you so much for joining the panel.
It's my pleasure to be here. Should I go into share screen right away? I guess
If
so.
you like, or if you want to talk ahead, as you prefer.
Well, I'll do both. Let's go. Make sure I can do it. Here we go. And you tell me if you see my slideshow.
We see you.
Okay, good. I'm going to go into slideshow. Okay, thank you so much. I'm Pamela Casper. Lois, that was a gorgeous presentation. I'm so pleased to be here tonight. And this evening, I'm going to present work that many of you may not have seen. You may know me more from my underground Imagine Landscapes, but tonight I'm going to focus on work that has really stemmed from my love of the Impressionists and on-site painting. I'm also going to talk about myself as a gardener. All the gardens, pretty much all the gardens I'll be showing you are gardens that I've planted myself. So my admiration for artists such as Monet and Sargent resonates in my depiction of light and form through color. It also resonates in the use of visible brushstrokes and my unusual choices of composition and ordinary subject matter. My gardening style is influenced by the naturalistic and sustainable approach of William Robinson, a 19th century Irish horticulturalist who I admire. And in his book, Wild Garden, I read about his appreciation for the beauty of native species and hardy perennials and shrubs. And whoops, my slideshow seems to be doing something on its own. Okay, we will try to change that. In any case, his approach seemed to match my spirit. In this picture, you see the garden that you saw in the previous watercolor before it really grew into shape. It was pretty scraggy. This is my backyard Brooklyn garden. And here I am trying to plan it better. I used a method, an age-old method of just sketching things out and trying to imagine ahead of time the combination of colors and leaves that I needed to use to find the effects I wanted to achieve. Several years later, things began to take shape. It took a while, but I was very pleased with the outcome, and it really
What happened?
for me. And it's also wonderful. It's the same garden. And you can see where I sit to take refuge from the busy life of being a mother in urban Brooklyn. And it definitely provides a great deal of peace. Now, I look for in these backyard garden views the extraordinary thing in light and color. And I'm also attracted to the combination of man-made structures with nature. Now here is a wonderful June blooming climbing rose, which existed in my backyard garden when we first moved in. And my husband and I had to rebuild the arbor to carry it because it's quite full. I really enjoy bringing together that lush, beautiful softness of nature and then contrast it with the urban details of windows and even metal gates. This is a corner of my garden, a watercolor here again. I call it my potted garden. This allows me to bring in points of color where I can't really plant. These are backyard petunias. Now, this is flaming parrot tulips, and this is at the base of the fountain that you saw in the previous paintings. They aren't very sustainable, but they're really gorgeous. And although I love them, I decided this was not a reliable source. I had to order them from Holland, and they don't come back every year. And that kind of went against my philosophy of gardening. Sorry. This is a foxglove oil on canvas. And in this painting, I was able to capture what I love about this flower and also the background, which is dark. It's a very shaded garden. And this was one of my successes I had to find flowers that grew without much light in this back area. One of our great refuges in the urban setting is the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. I was attracted to this view particularly because it represents that very free style of planting that I discussed with, that I was inspired to follow with William Robinson's approach, where you move away from the stylized, very rigid beds of the Victorian era and work with plants that are indigenous and perennial and don't need to be grown in a hothouse because they don't belong. The next group of works I'm going to share with you are from my travels across probably around 12 years of travel. And many of them had been done before I had my own gardens to plant in. Here's a perfect example of the cottage style garden. William Robinson popularized this style of garden when he talked about the English cottage garden, which paralleled the search for honest simplicity of the arts and crafts movement. And rather than valuing grandeur, this movement cherished grace and charm. And during my travels, I tried to capture the vernacular style of planting around the local cottages that I observed in the different places that I traveled to. This is a painting I did this past summer in Idaho. It's of the Millionaire's Pool, known by many fly fishermen because, I don't know, maybe there are a lot of trout in the pool, or maybe it's millionaires who go there. I'm not quite sure. But in any case, the vision of this fence and the water behind it made me think of the words of William Robinson in his book, in which he says, "In the wild garden, their stately beauty will be more remarkable than ever under the green leaves in copses and by streams." And I felt this totally echoed what he says. Here are fabulously structured echinacea flowers right next to a very New England style porch. And of course, the bees love them as well. This is, my slideshow got put on automatic somehow, and I didn't do it, but that's why I keep going back and forth. In any case, these are delphiniums with an old woodshed behind it. Still, we're in America. And here I traveled to the Bahamas. And clearly, once you change environment, everything changes, the flowers, the leaves. And this was quite an extraordinary vision. The light was amazing. The colors, not only of the flowers, but of the leaves themselves, were so varied and enormous as well. And the same I can say is true for Brazil. I have family who live in Brazil, and I've visited a number of times, and I'm always amazed at how colorful the leaves are and how enormous they are. Here again is a Brazil veranda. Brazil has such a long growing season that even in winter, things are flowering. A Brazilian guest house. Now here we have the Provençal Ma, or farmhouse. This particular image was an example of the very practical style gardens of the old houses with gardens. You see this throughout France, and especially in the entryways of the country houses. So that vine that you see here provides both shade and it's edible. The ancient cottages were very practical even before William Robinson, and they combined vegetables and herbs and fruit trees alongside of the flowers. This is La Grange Provençale, and you can see the stone gardens, and they contain roses alongside of rosemary and herbs, lavender. In this view, it's also France, it's northern France. The wall garden and the potted garden are very much a motif that are utilized to bring color to the stone cottages. This is the Languedoc area. And in these paintings, especially this Languedoc painting, I'm not looking to really render the individual flowers and the shapes, but to give an overall feeling of what these plants' character is. Another beautiful entryway in Languedoc, France. Le Trésor is the name of this wonderful abode. And again, you see the grapevine above, the potted plant, the local grass, and they all reflect the environment, the heat, the dryness, but it all works because they're native. My last segment, I'm going to take you on a little trip upstate and introduce you to the wild fields and the wild gardens as inspired by both William Robinson and Pete Udolph. At first, let me say that to plant upstate is quite an ordeal. I discovered very early on that I could not dig with a shovel. I needed a pickaxe. And for every plant I put in, this is the amount of stones that come out. Yet I did manage to plant and grow some beautiful delphinium. And ultimately, I decided to create a raised bed garden, which you see here. The raised bed garden eliminates the whole mining aspect. My daughter Viola has always said to me, "Mom, you're not gardening up there, you are mining." And she was right. And so I created this raised bed garden, which is essentially a wooden dam filled with just earth, and it's slightly raised above the surface of the ground. And I was able to choose the flowers and put them in relatively easily and quickly. In this painting, I very much looked at Sargent and Homer and the way they use the dark background against the foreground of the flower or the element. I also looked at Monet. I love his Giverny gardens and the multitude of little flowers and colors, and of course the shapes, the geometry of the flowers. Hollyhock. And this is an oil on canvas. So all the works you'll see are watercolor and oil on canvas. Now, Pete Udolph is a great landscape designer. He's from Holland, and he definitely designs within the tradition of William Robinson. And he inspired me to think differently about the piece of land that my husband and I bought 7 years ago, an old piece of farmland, which is where you saw the raised bed garden. And we had 22 acres of old fields, and we tried to think of how to cultivate it and appreciate it. And Pete Udolph was great inspiration. And so we cut these paths through the wildflower fields. And these two paintings, this is an oil and this is a watercolor, are of the same scene. And you can see how the two mediums can lead to different outcomes. However, we had vast areas of field that we wanted to do something with. And I decided that I wanted to try to bring wildflowers that I saw in France to upstate New York, such as poppies and cornflowers. And we had fields full of invasive weeds actually called knapweed. And so we needed to invite this farmer to come and till the soil, rip out the weed roots so that our seeds could take root. And here you are seeing my valiant husband mixing 200 pounds of sand with 20 pounds of seed. And ultimately we spread the seed on this enormous field, took about 3 hours. However, the outcome was amazing and great subject matter as well for my painting. Here you see I planted half the field in red poppies and half in blue cornflowers. Ever the painter, I tried to sculpt and paint the field itself. And in these watercolors, my aim is not to paint each flower, but to give the impression of the overall feel of the flowers, the magnitude of the field. However, poppies are not sustainable. They aren't even perennials, they're annuals, and they don't come back. So as a result, we set out to choose a seed mix that would be sustainable and perennial. And we chose the Northeast pollinator mix and did the same thing. We tilled the soil, we spread the seed, and this is what we got. It was pretty amazing. An incredible mixture of oranges and blues, fitting in with the landscape, very Pete Udolph. I was very happy. A lot of fun to paint. However, I started to really need to paint more than just the overall scene and found myself in the field. I just couldn't resist. The individual flowers were so interesting, so full of variety. And Coreopsis, Cosmos, cornflower. Thank you, Greeks and Romans, for the names. And so I painted both detail close up as well as some sort of sense of distance. The fields changed as the seasons passed, well, from month to month, which was very gratifying, very much still in the Pete Udolph style. And even in fall, they had value and merit. Here's an oil on canvas. This was October, I believe, and just gorgeous. That's my back to the garden. Thank you to Joni Mitchell for your clarity, and many thanks to Lois Bender for originating this presentation and inviting me to be a part of it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank
That was great. It was terrific. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Mhm. If anybody has questions at the end, we're going to invite you to ask a few of us questions, or we might have questions for each other as the artists, or we might have time to listen to Joni Mitchell. But thank you so much, Pamela, for the presentation. And I'm going to introduce Shelly. So Shelly, give me a moment while I sing your praises. And Shelly Haven is also a New York Artists Circle member. Shelly Haven's work is inspired by nature and motivated by environmental concerns. Her studio practice includes painting, drawing, and printmaking mediums. Her work is collected in the Library of Congress, MoMA, the New York City Public Library, the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, University of Iowa, NYU, Pfizer, and AIG. Recent awards include a City Artist Corps grant, a Brio painting grants, and a Hudson River Museum teaching artists in residence. Fellowships abroad and in the US are important influences on the nature-based focus of her work. Shelly's exhibit at Wave Hill, The Architecture of Nature, presented recent works in one of her gardens inspired artwork shown this evening. Other exhibits exhibitions include the New York Public Library, Pfizer World Headquarters, Binghamton University, Fairleigh Dickinson University, and Leslie Heller Gallery. Opening this Wednesday, Shelly's work is included in the Scale Within an Artist Practice exhibition at the Great Hall. She is also currently exhibiting at the Yonkers Art Gallery. A native New Yorker, Shelly lives in the Bronx and works in her studio in Yonkers. Ms. Haven teaches at the School of Visual Arts and in park, garden, and museum settings. Shelly is an avid hiker, cyclist, and shore walker in her home community, as well as across the US and world. Her creative practice, inspired by these experiences, advocates for environmental awareness and sustainability. Okay, thank you so much, Shelly. And I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Lois.
Sure.
It's wonderful to share this with Pamela and Lois. And tonight, I'm actually putting my slides on automatic because I feel digitally challenged. And then I will talk as we go. So share screen. Here we are. Whoops. Why isn't that working? Oh, share. Okay. So this is just going to roll and I'm going to read. I don't feel comfortable just letting it go. So let's see what happens. So I'm beginning with this image of me working in pastels on rock formations below Umpachini Falls in the Berkshires. As a hiking artist, the recent focus of my artwork has often been in the wild. However, all my work on site has its roots in my exploration of gardens. So these first artworks I'm showing are gouache paintings on paper. They're 10 by 14 inches or 12 by 16 inches, painted in 2014, 2015. This first group that you're looking at now, we're done at Wave Hill, which has already been mentioned by Lois tonight. And following those will be others done at Untermeyer Gardens. And the last of this group was done in the Heather Garden. As I'm working, I'm very often aware of the pattern and texture and movement through the page and the changing light and just trying to capture it all together. Painting on site in flower gardens began as a journey to make my new neighborhood home by exploring these incredible sites. Wave Hill in Riverdale is walking distance from where I live now. The other's a short drive. Untermeyer Gardens in Yonkers, the Heather Garden in Fort Tryon Park, Washington Heights, and the New York Botanic Garden in the Bronx. I walk these gardens and the surrounding parklands often. In most of my work in the gardens, as you'll see, I am attempting to surround myself with the plantings, to be inside the garden space. Rarely do I locate the horizon, and the edge of the page is all that contains the explosion of colors and shapes flowing throughout the space. It is a remarkable experience to sit quietly in these garden spaces, to sharpen my sensory awareness of the information swirling around me, to focus and work. So these next artworks are pastels, and they're all 15 by 22. The first is from Untermeyer Garden. You see the Temple of the Sky behind it. Wave Hill with these darker images and the yellow golden flowing from it. This pastel was done in the New York Botanical Garden. And this last one goes back to Untermeyer Garden. It's the pool that's within the walls of the Persian garden. And all of these are changing constantly. The next works I'm showing you are watercolor. In 2017 and 18, my work focused on 20 watercolors. Each is 8.5 by 8.5 inches. They were painted at the Heather Garden in Fort Tryon Park. It was a fantastic experience to watch the progression of flowers and even the change in the bird and insect population as late spring progressed toward late summer. The migration of the monarchs is something not to be missed. Of course, all of these gardens are planted to attract and support these migrations. Working on site pushes me to see and react, make the first decision and then the next. It becomes a travel adventure full of surprises and unpredictability I must respond to in the moment. I work immersed in an explosion of colors and textures with light and temperature ever changing, branches, leaves, and flowers dancing, the sound of wind, bird song, and insect buzz, aromas mingling. I build layers of color and mark, and the accumulation of hours and days reveals special secrets that begin to inhabit the page. I find my voice in the layering of patterns and colors, repetitions and rhythms, and the energy and mood of the day is revealed. I'm not looking to make accurate botanical studies, but faithful portraits of the moment. The Heather Garden, as well as Wave Hill and Untermeyer Gardens, sit on a bluff overlooking the Hudson River with sweeping views of the Palisades. The Heather Garden and the New York Botanical Garden are profuse with densely planted flower beds that overwhelm the senses. Throughout the growing months, new relationships are forged among the plantings as buds yield fresh blossoms, just as others fade away. Wave Hill was the first to capture my imagination and introduce me to the grandeur and the contemplative qualities of beautifully designed flower gardens. Surrounded by woods, ponds, architectural features, and lawns, even private residences now converted to gallery spaces. When I made my introductory visit to Untermeyer Gardens after a major snowfall, it was still quite a ruin, languishing in another spectacular setting on the bluff. Here is a Persian walled garden featuring symmetrical canals and Greek and Roman architecture, surrounded by garden streams, woodland paths, and a magical stairway leading down to a viewing platform overlooking the Hudson River and Palisades Vista. My working on site creates in me a sense of place and a profound appreciation for the seasonal changes. I draw the patterns and rhythms across the page. I mix colors and paint. The sun travels, the light shifts, and with it shifts the shadow and intensity of hue. I am filled with a sense of adventure in the immediacy and the surprises the process brings. I am always struck by the fragile beauty of nature as well as its awesome power. Being immersed in nature teaches me that change wrought by the passage of time is the only constant and truth in life. And my art making tracks the development of my own history of perception, process, and growth. So I'm ending here with this image of me drawing on site in a northern Spain mountain landscape, nature looming large. In my hiking travels, I embrace the excitement of spontaneous discovery in the wild, even as I continue to return back to the garden. Thank you. And let's see what I have to do. Stop share. Thank you, Lois,
Thank you, Shelly.
for organizing this. And it's been challenging digitally, but it's been exciting. And it's gotten me to think a lot more about these last 8 years of working in my local gardens and what it's meant in terms of all my work. I also do work in my studio quite a bit, but these gardens really push me to get out and work outside. And when I travel, I'm doing that all the time. Not necessarily gardens, it's more often mountains, boulders, oceans. So anyway, thank you, Lois, and both of you did great. And we'll see what we're doing now.
Well, thank you, Shelly. Yeah, we have time, and but I love how we're all different in that Shelly has a practice of also working with wilderness rocks, nature. I really am more involved with groomed gardens. Pamela has her own garden and property and works with those elements. I'm kind
Above
of
and below ground gardens.
yeah, I'm a nomad. That's what happens when you don't have your own property. But the variety of all the gardens to see and enjoy is what is very motivating. And working at the botanical garden and having my interest in the healing aspect made me seek out gardens very early. But I'd like to see if there are any questions. And thank you for the wonderful comments for everyone. And we really appreciate that we could do this on a cold winter night where in 3 months we should be trying to get out there and plant gardens or go to one. But any comments that we could field, and if Doug sees anybody, that would be great. Everyone's speechless, right?
We answered everybody's questions ahead of time, I guess.
I was trying to be a little shorter and go a little quicker, just to be able to survey the different aspects of my working background. But I'm sure each of us have another couple of hours to talk about our work. I don't know if I see.
I'd like to say something, Lois. You know, I paint, or I did a lot of outdoor work too, and I thought it was fabulous to see how all of you had such originality, that you really, your own work, everybody has their own way of working. And when you meet something like nature, you know, you use your way and your view to encompass it. So we get such original work on the same themes. I mean, I did a lot of what Shelly did, you know, and I call it a wild garden. I never called it. I called it weeds and wildflowers, but it was a wild garden. I would just find gardens in the fields, you know, they're fields of weeds or whatever. So I really related to that. And Pamela, I adore your work. You know that. I thought they were really amazing. I've been watching your work for years, and these are just crystal. I mean, they just sparkle, and you really have both mastery of technique and a great eye and a great love, you know. And Lois, you know that you're fabulous. The different ways you work astound me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of stencils. Oh my God, stencils and making and oil painting and watercolor and I mean, you name it. And Lois puts it all together. And she has her own take. So I think, aside from the fact that all three of you were amazing, I think the combination, you know, really is exciting, you know, to see all of it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Regina. That's a wonderful comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of range, and that's amazing. We're going to have a garden show for our group, the New York Artist Circle, and I expect to see fabulous work, fabulous range, and I'm looking for some literary inspiration, so please get them ready. No, I guess I've looked inside in the spiritual aspect of writing and the physical aspects of gardens, but I love the variety that is out there and that my two artist friends have shown. Do we have any other comments?
I have one for you, which is up every spring. It's usually like mid to late April. The Cornell Extension, the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Ulster County, in I believe it's Stone Ridge or Marbletown. They do a garden day, which is first of all a wonderful event, and you can buy plants, and they have a bunch of different tracks, maybe about 30 different presentations. You should take this on the road. The three of you should get booked into that event and anything else like it, because it would be such a great fit. And I think they would love you. So if you're interested in that, I'll supply it to you, Lois, like where to
Okay,
contact.
book us.
Yes.
Well, I teach in college, and so I try to lecture with interest. The slideshow was my idea, and I said that we could not talk and give you the information of art history in a real way with real talking, because it would just detract from the 3 of our work, because it would be so much mental energy to listen and pay attention to facts. So we came up with the idea of a quick slideshow. And if you'd like, we could play it again later with Joni Mitchell's soundtrack on it. But I'd love to hear any more comments or thoughts. Norma, I see you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry if I don't see you. Just unmute if you want to speak. So, sorry, go ahead.
okay, I'm not muted. I just wanted to thank the 3 of you and say this was like a vacation. It was so great to see this, especially in this terrible wintry night. I am so glad you presented it. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. That's a great feeling to feel that we brought some sort of breath of fresh air to this grim winter.
Warm air.
Yes, as I was walking,
Warm and fresh air, yes, and sun.
yes, walking outside this afternoon, I was thinking tonight is a perfect night to be looking at flower gardens.
I agree. Look, we need
So
color.
I want to appreciate all 3. It was what was really interesting. I've been sitting here just really breathing inside of it, because okay, you're all doing gardens, so okay, and how distinct each presentation was. I mean, I appreciated the way each presentation, the combination of slides and information. And then I'm just breathing in the distinction, because, okay, you're looking at a garden and sometimes it's the same garden, but each of you, it's like, okay, and this is what being an artist is in many ways, for me at least. There's a yellow, but I saw like, 17 different yellows that went through the different works. So I was just breathing in the distinction and the precision of some that almost looked photographic, and then interpretive, and then the combination of when, the structure. And it was really peaceful. And I'm familiar with some of the places. So that was just interesting too, to sort of recognize something, but recognize it through one of the presenters' eyes. And I know Shelly, and I've seen a lot of your work, but I've never seen some of this. So this was like an explosive. All your work is a treat, but this was just like a whole another book. Oh, I haven't seen this book, and I've seen quite a lot of your work. So I was appreciative of that too. And I very much appreciate the consciousness of the relationship to the garden. I belong to a community garden, which I like for now. Mostly I go and take my compost, which I really appreciate. But that mental consciousness of the importance is really important. I just want to, I'm very appreciative.
Thank you.
Carletta.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I'd
we
like to-
succeeded.
I'd love to
If
jump
that's the
off from what
response.
Carletta said,
Yes.
just to ask you a question. Before this presentation, your work all dovetailed so beautifully together. How much did you know each other's work before this, or were you surprised to see so many crossovers and connections?
Well, may I respond? I can respond. I know Shelly's work because Shelly sends out excellent newsletters, and I always look through them all and read them. And so I've been able to view her work, and I love her outdoor work. And I've been watching it for years. It was Lois who discovered some of the pieces that you did, Shelly, that were garden oriented, but I love how you paint and the way you see. And Lois and I have been going out on plein air site paintings for a couple of years, and I've been to the gardens that she showed and painted them. I didn't want to show those because I felt it was too much of an overlap, so I shied away from that. But Lois knows my work. I know Lois's work pretty well. We talk about gardens and plein air painting a lot. So I think that was a good match. I think we each watched each other's presentation and then went back and worked on them. And I think over time, over the last few days, I don't know, Shelly, if you feel this way, or Lois, I think we realized where we needed to be more ourselves so that we wouldn't overlap each other.
Yeah, it was the presentation itself was a process, definitely. Yeah. And sharing with each other was great. I come into it knowing both of you work really only online and not knowing either of you that well. Lois, obviously I knew before, but not that well. And Pamela, it's all been digital, I think, emails and looking at websites. So this gave us an opportunity to actually share crossovers and differences in a place that we all love, which is always wonderful for artists, especially in this time.
Yeah, well, I almost had this topic ready. It was amazing because Doug asked me 2 weeks ago, but it's almost as though I've been, I have garden in my blood. As you heard, my mother and grandmother. I was destined to be Horty, which is the slang for hortense, but my father came to the rescue. So there aren't that many Horties in our generation, but the flower names are incredible. But I just have felt close to gardens and flowers. I mean, even if they were named that and I didn't have the artistic leanings, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't be an artist, but their names, there was a mythology and a romance to gardens. I've had that forever. And it was easy to find a few friends to share the panel with. It was just like really a lot of work for 2 weeks, but I hope you've enjoyed it. I wanted to have the history presentation so that we wouldn't have to go back and refer to history every minute. And I hope it set up the mood to understand how the variety of gardens influence us, and that to appreciate the Japanese garden versus the European formal garden. I mean, you can love them all, but you can't paint them all at once. It's a lot of beauty out there. Doug, yes.
Lois, why don't we go back to the garden?
Oh, you want to play the music? You want me to play?
Yes.
If you want
It's
to,
time.
otherwise I'll thank everybody, but if you'd like to play the music.
Thank you.
It's
It's a great song.
Play
You
a
should
few
all
minutes
stay
of
and
it.
hear it.
Doug, please finish. What do you want to say?
No, I say, why don't you play some of that music and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. All right. Just, why don't you talk one moment? I have to prepare that. It was one of those things where I didn't prepare that one. Just give me 2 minutes. Talk amongst yourselves, please.
I'd like to say that I really do want to thank Lois for asking me to do this, because in the process of doing this, aside from my immediate situation of getting to know my local gardens, it brought back a lot of memories of gardens, gardening with my dad when I was very young, graduate school in Iowa, having a huge vegetable garden with a rototiller and the whole works, and a little garden, in my little backyard in Brooklyn where I lived for a while.
Where did this come from?
Yeah.
It started automatically, but I have to now share the screen. Okay, just a moment.
Great painting.
All right.
Great portrait.
Yeah.
Really good.
Is this, who's sharing this? Oh, can I?
It's T. Lawrence Wheatman is
T.
sharing
Lawrence
the
Wheatman's
screen.
screen.
So yeah.
All
good.
right, I'm going to share. Can I share? Okay, I'm going to, it's Joni Mitchell, and we struggled to make sure the ads weren't playing from YouTube. So just a moment. Okay, this has Joni. It's a little lower. We're thinking that the very loud recording was distracting. Okay. Okay, here we go.
So I stayed home in New York and I watched it on television all day and saw everybody there playing and singing, and it was really a nice festival, I guess, and the looks of everything. And well, I wrote a little song for my friends to sing and for myself to sing as well, and it's called Woodstock. It goes like this. Came upon a child of God. He was walking along the road, and I asked him, I said, where are you going? And this he told me. I'm going on down to Yansby's farm, gonna join in a rock and roll band. I'm gonna camp out on the land, Lord, I'm gonna try and get my soul.
I'd like to I'd like to thank a few people. This is Doug speaking. I'd like to thank, obviously, Lois, Shelly, and Pamela. Thank you, the three of you, lovely. And I would like to thank the members of the ATOA Programming Committee who work a great deal on putting together all the panels. The Board of Directors and all of our interns and volunteers, but especially Maruna Stratton and Natalia Dragner for running Zoom for us and also YouTube, and Kristen Eichenberg, who assists me with the programming. And of course, thank you all for coming tonight. Good night.
Good night and thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to be with you.
Thanks for everybody who came. Thank you, Doug.
Yes, thank you for joining us and thank you for giving us this space to show our gardens.
Very welcome.